Hey everybody, this is Perch. I got this email that actually sent me down a weird rabbit hole of trying to get to, the rules. And the problem is there aren't clear rules. And so that's one of the things that, well, we'll get into why there's a bit of a misnomer, but it's an interesting thing to contemplate because while I don't agree with everything that the person who wrote the mail said, I think there's facts that both back up and conflict what's being said. The heart of the topic is very true, which is basically that the big companies, whether you're Disney or whether you're Marvel or whether you're DC or whoever you are, you often don't love to pay royalties. In many cases, agreements were signed in the 70s and 80s and to some extent the 90s that a lot of people look at today as very unfavorable. And you hear stories all the time about creators being cheated out of royalties or companies forgetting to pay them, or in a lot of cases, and unfortunately, creators in comics will not like me saying what I'm about to say, but a lot of deals were done on handshakes, and handshakes aren't contracts. And so unfortunately, if the company was paying you for a while, cool, that's good, but legally they technically didn't have to. Now, if you do not sign a contract, but you go ahead and pay somebody what feels like an established royalty, you can take them to court and say, look, they set a precedent of doing this, even though there wasn't a contract. They clearly did this. So this gets very, very complicated very quickly. But let me outline what the letter writer said. The so-called diversity of replacing our iconic heroes instead of creating new characters from diverse non-white male backgrounds is fallacious. When challenged, people from those groups come to the corporation's defense that it's necessary because the new original diverse characters are being created all the time, but they can't compete with famous iconic characters with decades of history behind them. So the icon needs replacing to push diversity. Now I'll pause here for a second. I mean, there's truth to that. Look, it really has to do with your patience. And people hate hearing that. But Spider-Man has existed now for 60 years. That's right, 60 years, basically, a little bit less. These characters have been around for decades. And, Spider-Man, white male Peter Parker, Spider-Man, has had 60 years to build up brand. And building up brand doesn't just mean making comics, it's what we may think about, but it also means making t-shirts, making toys, getting licensed deals, getting the property known in other countries and other regions and other continents. And it takes a while to get your brand distributed. A lot of people like to bring up manga, like manga's doing it perfectly. Well, yeah, manga's doing it well, but keep in mind, manga does the same thing. My Hero Academia, and I had this fierce argument with an idiot yesterday. My Hero Academia did not start in 2020. Maybe that's when you, the reader, became aware My Hero Academia began, but My Hero Academia actually started much, much earlier than that. It's things take a while before they get distributed, before they go other places. It tends to take a while. So this isn't just a you wave a magic wand and instantly the brand is worldwide known. My Hero Academia started in 2014. It's coming up on 10 years, and it's really impressive how well My Hero Academia has done in basically 7 years. It's really impressive. It's done far better, far faster than most. But the fact that My Hero Academia just kind of got known by U.S. audiences like in the last 2 years, some people certainly knew about it earlier than that, but it got widespread appeal about a year and a half ago. It took a while to get there. So if you think about Batman, Spider-Man, all these characters, it takes a while for this IP to go over. So it is true to say if our goal is to get a new and diverse character, hey, it's going to be much faster to piggyback off of an existing worldwide known IP than something new. That's true. Now, I would argue that piggybacking rarely works out. And we do see that when you try and change up brands, it rarely works. The people don't accept the change. Many people seem confused by the change. It doesn't terribly work. And you're better off with your brand to build new IP, build new characters, put some good marketing and some time and some investment into them. Go back if you're Marvel and actually put some money into Mosaic and give Jeff Thorne some royalties and push that character for 5-6 years, and you will probably get a better result. maybe not. But it's harder work and it requires patience, and a lot of people don't have that. But anyway, this letter goes on, and here's the part to really talk about, because this is where it gets sticky. Um, he basically says this actually, meaning the replacement of heroes, helps the company maintain the IP against the creators' families while also enabling them not to pay full percentages because the IP has been changed by 25% or more. And the more this is done legally means they can use the icon, but is varied enough to be a new IP that doesn't have to credit the creator's estate completely. And then he writes two examples, which have been disputed to some extent, but let's give them. This is the same reason why DC removed Superman's red underpants and boots in 2011. It was couched as contemporizing, but it was all IP based. There's been different stories about that. So for this one, Superman, that was one of the claims that some of the license holders gave to say, hey, this is why they're doing that. But it was also untested in court, meaning in fact, I think the opposite was found, that removing his red underpants did not constitute a new character. Now, we don't know. Maybe this is why Dan Didio and crew removed the red underpants, because they were trying to get out of this. It's hard to tell. Dan Didio is never going to say that out loud in an interview. And the people involved in creating it are standing by we were trying to contemporize, because, red underpants is silly and goofy. So we wanted to contemporize a character. And so we don't know for sure that that's what they were trying to do. If that is what they were trying to do, it was a failure. It actually did not. The courts ultimately rejected that argument. But it could be. I'm not. The thing is, we don't have proof for this, and I don't want to really live in a world of speculating with these kind of rumors. I don't want to do that. But it's hard not to feel a little bit less suspicious of these kinds of things, because the comic publishers do have a historical track record of doing this kind of stuff at the expense of creators. They absolutely do. So it's like if you're gonna, it's easy to go, oh, that's ridiculous. But then it's like, but but there have been plenty of instances where the comic companies and the big entertainment companies have tried to do exactly this. So it's not outside the realm of possibility. The next one is the one that people have heard about. There's been a lot of videos made about this, and a lot of people saying they have definite, for sure, absolutely inside sources that claim this is the case. And that is that Disney, Kathleen Kennedy did it for Force Awakens, as for C-3PO. And then I think the argument is for a lot of comics in general, a lot of Star Wars stuff in general. The reddening of C-3PO's arms enabled their legal claim that they had changed everything a minimum of 25% so they could reduce IP, etc., to George Lucas. I believe the story is actually going, that they're suppressing a lot of the original characters because they don't want to have to pay licenses to George. So not just the red arm, because the red arm is there's not. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing. Maybe there's some inclusion aspect to a red arm. I don't know. The writer says they mask as public clout chasing. I'm not sure what the red arm would do for that. I mean, like, is that gonna, like, is that a thing that people care about? Like, a red arm indicates that you're part of the LGBT community. I don't know. I don't know exactly what that would do, but maybe. I mean, I'm old, so what do I know about red arms? But this topic, so this is where it's hard to kind of assess what's true and what's not. It is a fact that corporations do look for ways to reduce royalties. There's been plenty of books, plenty of articles, plenty of material with Disney named for how to make changes to the IP, how to move on, basically, without having to pay the original license holders. And, it always feels slimy because in many cases, Disney goes and they buy the license. I know there's some arguments with the Studio Ghibli material that Disney had a stake in for a while. I think still does, but I don't know. Now it's over on HBO. Who knows? But anyway, there's these cases where, they buy this IP, they spend the money to do it, and then they proceed to immediately try and figure out how to pay less for the thing they just bought. And, for me, if you're asking me as a, human being, an individual, I think that's lousy. I think you deserve, creators who do this stuff should get the money they're owed and the deal that was signed. If the creator did this deal for you, work for hire, and negotiated no royalty, nothing like that, no ownership, then I tend to side with the corporation. I know that's that can also be kind of lousy, and people don't like that. But I mean, ultimately, you signed a deal. I think you should live by the deal you signed. But is this one of the driving reasons why characters change, do race swapping and kind of other things, gender swapping with characters, is to get out of the IP? My personal belief is no. If you're asking me, I don't think that's the primary reason. I think it is, as stated, I think there is a desire to, to basically talk to the new audience, freshen things up, and keep in mind a lot of these decisions to do this swapping are made with people made by people who have no vested interest in the company's success. And what I mean by that is they're contractors, so they're very short-term employees. They don't have this long-term commitment. They're playing with what's entertaining them in the moment, and they were given the keys to do that. And so they're not thinking about IP or cash or saving money or any of that kind of stuff. They're just thinking, somebody put me in to do this job, and I'm on a temp contract, so I'm going to do whatever I want, and then I'm going to go off and do the next job. And that's the thinking of a lot of people. It is true. I do believe, and that's why I read this mail and wanted to talk about it a little bit. I do think there is something to be said, though, that legal groups and finance groups do look at some of these things and go, yeah, we're going to support these decisions because it's going to save us money, or we're going to get out of paying a royalty, or there's that. I do think that happens. And I think that's one reason people ask, like, how could these corporations be letting these freelancers run amok and change characters that have existed for 50 years into unrecognizable things? One of the reasons I think they're allowed to do that, and why nobody stops them, is for financial reasons, is to get out of paying royalties. I do agree. And I think it's telling that when some of the new creators come in and they make these changes, they have less ownership. So they're basically taking something and they're not getting any royalties for the new character that's been created, or they're getting much less. And they're modifying something that could potentially save the company money. And I think if you're sitting on some of this IP, you're a business manager, you're like, hey, my costs go down. Great, sold. That's going to be something that leans in favor of allowing this stuff to go on. So I think this is a hard one, because the other thing is, some people have misrepresented you have to change it 25%. That's in courts now, and that's not turning out to be true. When this gets challenged, it tends to, like the Superman red trunks and other things. If people go to the trouble of sending it to court, it's just hard. Courts tend to not side with corporations who are doing this kind of, we're changing it just enough to not pay you. It's considered transparent. Courts look kind of down on it. Judges don't like it. They do believe it's playing in bad faith and bad form, and so it does have it's not winning very often. So whether or not this is a strategy, again, it's hard to tell. You don't know the hearts of people, but it's possible. I want to thank the person who wrote me this mail, because I think it's definitely possible. And some of the people involved, I can definitely believe it. But at the same time, it's hard to say whether this is a winning long-term strategy, or whether this gets kind of demolished in the courts, or just kind of makes a bunch of noise. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of these changes are from, again, part-time creators who kind of want to do what they want. And that's I think more the driving factor. But is there a financial component? Yeah, potentially. Just keep in mind that, remember some of the writers, some of the people who are doing this kind of stuff, and even some of the editors who are making like 30, 40,000 a year, tops in these companies. These aren't financial product geniuses in a lot of cases. These are kind of lower level people with temp contracts. And the idea that they'd have a sneaky long game of getting out of these payments, unlikely. However, the finance and legal departments of these companies, absolutely. Like I said, I know Disney goes through this process, and they absolutely do this kind of stuff. It's just, I think it's one of those, this may answer the question as to how these people are getting away with some of these massive IP changes that seem destructive. Why more people don't step in and stop it. Well, there may be a financial reason for that. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on this below in the comments. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening. And thanks for the email. I really appreciate the getting a chance to think about this.